Hello, everybody, and welcome back to DM Writer's Room. We've taken a short break, what with the holiday season and
Yes,
all,
yes.
but we're coming back to you with a very special episode today. Ethan, if you want to take it away and tell them all about what we're doing today, feel free.
Yeah, so you may be thinking to yourself, it's December 21st, it's 2023. They gotta be doing sort of a fun, whimsical Yuletide adventure. They've got decorations up. We are doing the complete opposite. By largely coincidence, we have ended up deciding to not necessarily make a game, because that's a little bit more work than we want to get into right now, but sort of make what are often called hacks of games, which is basically just sort of reskinning it, changing some components to suit a specific idea you really want to do. We are going to be taking a look at, because of an interaction that Spencer had while moving around New York City, a place that he either lives or is visiting. I'm not doxing, my friend. And Spencer, do you want to tell your little anecdote quick?
Yeah, we were walking through one of the major cathedrals in Manhattan, the one near Rockefeller Plaza, and as we were walking through, I looked to my right, and there was a fountain, like a drinking fountain, that was spurting out holy water. And I thought, that's strange. And then I thought, because I'm a nerd, that would be really cool in a TTRPG where you're like a monster hunter. This church would be one of the first places I would go. Like, oh shit, vampires. I'm beelining it. I'm filling up my Gatorade bottle, sealing it up, and I'm splashing the vampires with it. Like, that's where I would go. And I thought that was kind of goofy. And then I brought it to my boys here.
Now, at first we were talking about sort of trying to make this as a hack of the powered by the apocalypse system, but almost everybody in this call, I actually don't know how much Michael has played it, are huge fans of Monster of the Week, and so we didn't really feel the need to retread that ground. It's a game that we all love, and does a really good job. So instead, we were thinking about taking a stab at Morkborg. For those of you who don't know, Morkborg is a intensely grim, dark RPG about a group of survivors or criminals or fiends trying to make their way through the apocalypse, the end of the world. It is an intensely lethal game where characters die constantly, and the end of every campaign, no matter what you do, is the world comes to an end. So what it sort of ends up creating is a situation where the party is either scrounging for scraps to try to live comfortably until the end, or my personal favorite, these are always my favorite stories about Morkborg, parties trying to find a way off the planet. Parties trying to find a way to another universe where the world isn't ending, abandoning all those they have known and loved in their lives so that they can get a chance at survival. I always think is pretty fun. And so we're going to take a pretty hard turn at that, because we were thinking about, Cyborg and Pirate Borg, all these other versions. What does it look like if it's about a group of city-bound monster hunters, and unlike Monster of the Week, where life is cheap and monsters are powerful? Sort of a very different approach to that same thing. Less Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and more... I can't really think of a good one-to-one here. Nothing is really coming to mind. It's sort of like, I don't know, I'm thinking of like if the Warriors movie was about monster hunters instead of like different gangs in this city that is kind of New York but not really. So with that, we're going to take a look at how to do this. Morkborg really lends itself to this, so it shouldn't be too tough. We need to create a new setting, and then we basically need to just move through the book and address the tables that they present, and then suss out what do they not have that we need to tell this kind of story. We've matured as game designers, so I'm going to say that it's important that we keep something in mind, which is that what are you trying to capture? What feeling, like what is the point of this game? And just trying to always let that be your guide stone, because otherwise you end up with sort of bloated mechanics heavy games where you need an entire shelf of books to sort of keep up with the rules that they have for it. How do you make it a little bit tighter than that? So I think round robin, we need to sort of talk about setting, but I think we also all need to talk about like what feels most important to us about this iteration on both the formula that is the sort of genre of Monster of the Week shows and movies, alongside this like Morkborg. I'm trying to think of other games like early Cyberpunk, like games where characters drop like flies.
I think that we have two divergent paths that we need to cut off one of them right away. And it is that Monster of the Week versus Morkborg feel, where Morkborg, the end is coming. You're not going to do shit about it. Monster of the Week is you can do something and you can stop it from happening. Do we want it to be Escape from New York Morkborg edition? You got to get your ass out of whatever this made-up city is. That's the survival path. Or is it maintain the facade of a normal city while monsters are going crazy, kill them, so that way the nukes don't drop? What is the angle we're taking? I think I'd need to know that before I pick
Really
anything
tough
else.
decision. They're both
It's
really
so hard.
good. Yeah.
It's so hard.
It's, are we trying to get out of the city sort of 28 days later style? Or are we trying to keep things moving? Are we trying to keep the wheels on the car? They both fit the genre really well. You know, they're both stories that are impactful and emotional and can be really good, but are also have a tone of hopelessness of like, can we protect this place forever? Can we get far enough away that it will never catch up to us? I think it's very telling that we've been playing like Morkborg and Delta Green lately. A lot of this sort of genre of game.
If I can say one thing, the thought that I was having, have it being escape, but with the possibility of continuation after. The escape is portal to hell. That's where is where monsters are stronger. That's DLC almost.
It could be you escape the city and then the state is already infected. The nuke didn't drop in time, and then it gets harder.
It could be interesting to look at it as like how D&D treats tiers of play, right? There might be something interesting about like you preserve the city as long as you can, and the fail state of the game is a chapter that is called the escape. So it could be interesting to sort of divide the hack into two parts. Part 1, preservation. Part 2, escape. And
it's inevitable.
Yeah, you've kept everybody alive as long as you possibly could. The jig is up. You have to run. It's time to get out. And I like the idea that is a cycle that continues. Because this doesn't necessarily need to be a city in our world. So it could be a city in a world where these monstrous infections are somewhat common.
I think that's the best way to do it. I think the first cycle of play, you're fighting monsters. They're not so intense and so powerful that it's not possible. You're going to die. Many of your characters are going to die, but you're doing what you can without spreading the word about what's going on. Then word gets out. Whether that's 2 days, 5 days, a week, a month, eventually the U.S. government at large is going to find out and they're going to nuke the place. And then you have to get the fuck out with everybody you've gathered up.
Now, I do think it is interesting. I'm now really debating whether or not this is a game set in the United States, or only because you brought up the like holy water example, my mind is going to this like more like fantastical than alt history, but this my into it is this like hyper Catholic Vatican world where like once the infection,
Vatican world instead of Vatican City.
Once the city has reached a point where it cannot be saved, that like there is an this like I don't know what you would call. There's like a crusade is the end state. That is what you are afraid of. Like one of the lines in the book would be, "All fear the crusade that comes." You know, this inevitable thing that is spoken of where entire cities are demolished, leaving a few thousand survivors to pick up the pieces. Or do we want to set it in our world and there is this assumption that there will be a gas leak? You know, something will happen and this will be wiped away. Terribly timed burp there. And that perfectly segues us into talking about our setting. So we have our core idea. The game moves through 2 stages. In stage 1, you are trying to save things, and if I'm looking at our comparison point here, which will be the calendar of Necrobell, right? All that time you spend rolling to see if something worse happens is the preservation cycle. You are moving through, kill that monster, kill the next monster, kill that monster, kill the next monster, kill the hive, keep things tight until you get to the end, something that cannot be survived. And then all you can do is flee. You've saved everybody for as long as you could. That's what you've got. Something that already makes true for me if we want this game to be emotionally impactful is we are going to need to add a downtime phase, right? We are going to need a year, a few months to pass, every couple of missions, because otherwise it's going to be well, you're preserving this city for a week. What are we doing here?
Yeah,
I think we need to stretch that time scale a little bit past the sort of, a couple hundred days before the world ends mode that they are working.
And
I was just saying, we could do one of 2 things. We could do it 1 mission per month, so a year, or the symbolism 6 that we keep on seeing, have it 1 every 6 months.
6 months. I would. My only counter is the characters don't know that you're only going to make it a week preserving the city. The players know, but the party would go, well, we're protecting people, we're protecting people. You get a fucking word from on high that the crusade is coming. You get the fuck out. You don't know it's only going to be 7 days.
It's also important to remember that our heroes are at the end of a lineage of fighting this, right? This city has existed for a long time, whatever city it is. We are meeting them at the end of that story.
And what was in Morkborg, I don't remember the name you had said, where it was you flip a coin or you roll a D100 or whatever variation.
The calendar of Necrobell.
Yeah, exactly. So it would be, I guess, the fastest I would allow it to go if I were the DM would be a week. I don't think that it should be any faster than that. It's you do 3 monsters, you save a bunch of people, but you know that it's coming. You're trying to get survivors out beforehand. So you're saving people from the clutches of monsters, and then you're getting the fuck out. Right? Or if it's 3 months, it's not that. It's you're trying to persevere for as long as possible. I guess that's a play style decision, table to table.
So I think that what we could do is, I think that the day you roll a 1. So for instance, in the calendar of Necrobell, the last day, the last psalm reads, where is it? No, sorry. All praise Yetsabu-Nech, the underworld's nightmare, the black disk which stands before the sun. All praise Verhum, beaming with delight. All praise the fire which burns all, and the darkness shall swallow the darkness. The world comes to an end. I think it's interesting if we just replace that with, depending on the flavor we want to go with some version of the crusade comes. The city is evacuating. Either run or buy time. And the party chooses. They choose to do one or the other. And so I like the idea that they fight monsters for 95% of the time, you are fighting monsters. That is what you are doing. And in the last 5% of the game, you are fighting people. This is this last moment where you make a choice. And you can tell the party, depending on how your party feels, make the choice. Are we running the escape? Or are we running the last stand, where you hold things back as long as you can while people get away? Sort of giving them the choice at the end, I think is... and it fits easily into this thing. I mean, we probably won't do Psalms, but we could do some version of, the crusade comes, the end is here, will you stand or will you flee? Choose now and prepare for war. And that's the last mission, is you have to do one of them. Okay. So now let's talk about what is going wrong. Is our cutoff time 8 or 8:30? We alternate between those two.
Michael, what's your cutoff?
8:30.
All right, 8:30 it is.
Okay.
an idea instead of songs, having be fortunes, having be read by an old fortune teller.
Fortunes is good. I was playing with like Fortunes is really good. I was playing with headlines. But I think that maybe isn't as strong as Fortunes. There's something fun about that. And we love to make people buy another thing to play our game, and throwing a tarot deck in doesn't sound half bad. Pull a card to see what portent.
And the other thing I was thinking of, and it's a question I was thinking about asking before, but it kind of plays into this. Do you think with the fountain, priests are just there casting bless constantly, or is there like scripture on the pipes?
They're definitely blessing the water. I think that there's probably a big reservoir in the back, and then they bless over the big tank, and it pumps through and cycles back until people use it. And then the next day it fills up and they bless it again.
Okay.
That's my guess.
Alright. And then the tie-in, I was thinking of, if it was the engravings, call, instead of fortunes, have engravings, and they're on, like, I don't know, each of the sewer manholes, and like that one's lit up because it's something that's been coming for a long time. It's built into the city.
That's pretty fun. I do think Fortunes. I think Fortunes works. You always see the hand, the neon hand. It's like Fortunes being told here. That would probably come about.
Yeah, and I like that, and it's something that I think there's a lot of really compelling stuff about, and there's also something so interesting to me about the way that people want so desperately to infuse meaning into fortune-telling cards. Like, they so desperately want to do that, and so I think it's a really powerful symbol that comes back and back. I always think of tarot cards, right, because there's this modern conception that they are religious, and the tarot cards come from a 15th century French card game. Like, they're just the suits for a card game. Like, they came from France and were part of a normal game people would play. And now there's so much meaning suffused in them that, like, there's a story in the news right now about a lady who's suing the police in her local city because they gave her a ticket for fortune telling because she was doing tarot card readings. There's something interesting to me about people's fascination with that. Okay, so we have a city being overtaken. We're moving through two phases, preservation and then either escaping or holding back. So we need something that is going to come destroy the city, and then we need something that we are pushing back. We know that's monsters in big quotes. I'm not sure. We'll have to talk about that a little bit. Do we want to delve into monsters into the world? Like, where do they come from? Or do we want to focus on this apocalyptic force?
I think leaving and entering to an alternate reality where everything has progressed pretty much similarly, but there is a shadow government or some sort of religious zealotry group that is incredibly powerful works well. I think that's fun because then you have something to fight against. A nuke, you're just running.
Yeah,
it's not. You can't have a last stand. It's got to be.
So it sounds like
an organization.
So it sounds like you want to talk about them first. Let's figure out what their deal is. Okay. Are we in alternate Earth or are we in a whole different thing?
Alternate Earth. I think it's an easier buy-in.
Okay.
You can hand wave a lot more shit if you're like, this is basically Earth.
Yes, Alter Earth, and then we said we are going to invent a setting. But it gives a group of people who are very familiar with a city the opportunity to just play there.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good. And the other thing I like about this, because of the way we've built it, is if people liked the concept of the game but didn't want to deal with this like apocalyptic ending, you could just do like the game loop and just sort of peter out at your own pace, which I'm sure lots of people do with Morkborg. Okay, so it's Alt Earth, and then we're going to invent a setting, and I'll put city in parentheses. So this organization, it feels a little risky to have it straight up be the Catholic Church or something.
Yeah, that's why it's alternate Earth. That's why it's got to be alternate.
I know, but if it's alternate Earth, then we can't get away from that. If we make it a vague, shadowy religious group, we are going to draw parallels to some problematic historical precedents. And if we pick a group,
Even worse.
that's not going to be great. So we either need to whole cloth invent something to say, like, this world's, whatever it is. It could be, we could have some fun with it. Like, this could be the world where, we could just pick, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think. We could just pick, like, a famous cult leader and be like, their cult has become the great religion of the world.
If I can throw one out, maybe it's the Monster Hunter org.
I was going to say the same thing. There is an actual Monster Hunter organization, but they are not interested in preserving life. They're interested in destroying monsters to keep the rest of the world safe.
Okay.
You guys aren't professional monster hunters. You're doing that shit so they don't show up. So
Okay.
it's not a religious organization, it's the Monster Hunter organization. I agree, Michael. I was thinking the same thing.
Okay, so we've got this villainous hunting group. And they're like a political power?
Yeah, they're sanctioned by the government. They're probably an arm of the government.
But one that has carte blanche to nuke a city, basically.
The thing of the government.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Okay.
They're called the Fang.
Okay. So we can call them the Fang. What does FANG stand for?
Fighting against...
This is one of those,
nocturnal...
real dangers.
Now, wait a minute. No. This is a government acronym. So G is like group. This is like the actual name of the group, and then they are called FANG for short.
Yeah. Fighting against nocturnal groups.
I think that's moving a little. I think you've stepped into silly, and we need to. We are trying to create an intimidating, distant force, and fighting against nocturnal bad guys is not, I think, our mode here. I'm something like a group
Fortification.
Right.
Final, first. Those are the first things I can think of for the F.
We can also return to this, but you want to attach something to that, and you need it to sort of fit. The CIA is not like the finding out secrets buddies. It's the Central Intelligence Agency. It's cut. It describes what they do in brief, snappy moments. I'm immediately getting, I think probably NG is neutralization group.
Okay.
Because it's the something neutralization group.
Fortifications and neutralizing groups?
First arm of the neutralization group.
Fuck! The neutralization group has other arms? Yeah, that's pretty good. First arm of the... And neutralization could be replaced, but
yeah,
first arm of the neutralization group, or of the...
And that adds, if we could be an arm of, but we're like the 50th arm of.
Yeah, you're the fucking civilian patrolman of Fang.
Yeah.
And you gotten word of this is gonna happen.
That could be very fun. I don't know, it's kind of challenging. But there is something fun about thinking about what, like, a residential... It accidentally turns our game, which I'm fine with, somewhat allegorical, into this, like, the way that... Unfortunately, like, the way that fascism dehumanizes the whole, but inevitably community spawns out of the small. Where it's like, Fang is this massive group that will destroy an entire city, but then you get down to this, like, local residential chapter, and there are monsters that are friendly to the community, that they don't hunt and are just aware of, and say, like, hey, let us know if anything is up, like, keep us abreast of what's going on in your community. Like, the sort of localized version that has this fear of the looming organization they are members of, that they know doesn't care, that they know is not interested in the local community. Or we could have them be completely disconnected. You are not an arm of Fang. Maybe that's the joke that you make, is that we're the 50th division. Like, maybe that's the bit, but they aren't actually members. Okay, so we have our bad guy. It's Fang. The fear is that the Fang of the government will come down. And when they do, the procedure, it sounds like to me, is clear. The city is isolated, and then I imagine from our description that they just move from one end to the other and sweep every building, every sewer, yeah, exactly. Anything that seems to have been affected is destroyed. And so when they get up and leave, the population of the city will have been halved. But as far as the government is concerned, it is sort of a mercy. And we need to make clear that, so that means also in this world, something worse happens if they don't show up.
I do think it is... Fang shows up because signs of the apocalypse are sprouting in this area. If everybody's dead, no more seals can be broken. There's not going to be any more fortunes. They're all dead. Nothing's going to happen. There's no infection to be spread. There's no apocryphal text to sprout. Shit like that.
Okay. So that sounds super cool. All right, so I like that, and that adds a lot of flavor that I think is really cool. So we know we have fortunes. We know we have this group called Fang. And we can occasionally have, some of the bad options being like agents of Fang. And so one of the things we will add, so for instance, that is a mechanic not covered by this, that we would need to add. I like the idea that one of the things you need to be hyper cognizant of are these agents. Agents of Fang are a looming, constant threat. If they see you doing something, you need to find a way to either convince them that the problem's not real or have them vanish and never report back. And that's the only option you have is, kill this person who, is willing to do whatever it takes. So that's something that's not covered here that we need to sort of prepare ourselves to think about. So moving on to setting, do we want to create a fictional city? It sounds like we do.
Michael, what are you saying?
I had one idea for the end state bad thing that happens.
Sure.
It's called the Blood Sun. Once all the fortunes have been told, the blood sun comes and it rains blood. Basically, that's a contagion that eventually spreads past the city, and that's why they're trying to keep it.
Oh, I'm hitting on the blood sun rises, and if it sets, the world will end, right? And that's why Fang shows up. Is if the blood sun rises, it cannot be allowed to set. The city has to be emptied. So that, and to be clear, it works. When a certain amount of the city has been taken care of, the blood sun goes away. Like that mirage fades from the sky.
So at best, your agents are keeping Fang away until the blood sun rises.
Yeah.
Because they're going to know, and they're going to show the fuck up and start clearing out. So there's like a 100-day end state, no matter what you do. Or something before then can kick off, and it starts.
And if we go with the Morkborg calendar, we might change it down from 36 things that need to happen before the end, though. So if you do the D100 for Morkborg, and 36 things need to happen before the world ends, that means 1 in 100 chance is pretty low. I'm trying to think of statistically how to work this out. It would be 600 sessions. Sorry, it would be 3,600 sessions.
Yeah.
Before statistically the world would end. And if each of those is a day, that means that your group can take solace in the fact that if you run a long-form campaign, you could be saving the city for 10 years. You could really be stretching it, letting these people enjoy their lives. If it's D2, 72 days. It's 2 months. Is on average.
Which is still pretty good.
Yeah, and I think that is something we can sort of drill down on, is people are like, but even if it's only 10 years, shouldn't you tell people to run now and have them be like, there's not a safer place to go. You know what I mean?
Have you ever talked to somebody who lives in fucking New York City? They'd be like, go fuck yourself. I'm not leaving Manhattan.
Yeah.
No, it just wouldn't work. They wouldn't leave.
And one of our downtime activities is like, I think there might be something fun in like, if there is something you can do to like better the situation around you, and if one of them is like appreciating the small moments that you are allowing to have continue, right? Your goal isn't to save 10,000 lives. Your goal is to let people live in the city for another day, is to let people go to work and get a coffee on the way home and smile because the coffee is good another day. Like, you're just trying to, it's the way that I think of,
shockingly hopeful Morkborg.
yeah. It's the way I think about games like Delta Green, because I don't really fuck with Grimdark too hard. Like, I do it in a goofy way, like turned up to 11 for fun can be fun. I don't really enjoy like banal, constant Grimdark. And so the way that I think about games like Delta Green is your agent is like, the world is going to end. Everybody's going to die. Humanity is going to be replaced. And whatever comes next will be worse, and then it will die and be destroyed until finally Azathoth consumes all. Like, but I can make sure that that doesn't happen today. You know, I can let, you know, some people are going to get to go to the movies and get a fucking pack of M&Ms and like watch Die Hard 9. Like, that I can do, is how I sort of always end up thinking about these games. Just because, I don't know, to me it's a little bit of a more interesting angle. So we're talking about like a 10-year time scale if you do a really long form campaign, and we can sort of, you know, swing some jumps there. And you just have this awareness that eventually they will show up. Because it's a city. They show up to every city eventually. It's just a question of how long can you make things wait. Okay, so let's talk about this. Do we want to talk about the city for the next 40? Our next timestamp is in 10 minutes. Before I'm going to check back in and try to keep us on track. Do we want to keep talking about the city, or do we want to keep talking about our sort of larger setting?
I think that we can. I think that that's honestly enough of the larger setting. Sans monsters, we need to figure that out.
Yeah.
I would like to jump into the city.
Okay.
10 minutes, I think, is long enough for us to talk about a generic city.
So, yeah, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this cityscape that we are in.
First things first, Ethan, you made an offhand joke before about how Morkborg leads into Hell City, USA. And I do think that for a name, I was thinking something like Helvetica, right? That's not a trademark term. Hell is in the name, and it sounds like a place.
It does.
Instead of like Hellville, USA, it's close enough.
And it also gives us the I don't know, it's a little cringy, but there is something fun about like the local people call it Hell, like the monster group calls it Hellville.
Yeah, true. Welcome to Hell, Vetica.
Welcome to hell, dipshit. Like, okay, very fun. I just found out that there is a joke font called Helvetica with 2 L's. But I'm just checking Helvetica on Wikipedia because I am curious about the origins. A widely used sans serif typeface developed in 1957 by Swiss typeface designer Max Meidinger. It is a neo-grotesque design influenced by 1890s typefaces. Is it trademarked, the name? Is my question. Trying to avoid dead air here. So this is the kind of stuff. So normally you guys just sort of, we're trying to demystify DMing is our like famous tagline here. This is demystifying publication, like trying to make products that you can publish. You do have to occasionally stop and go, whoa, wait a minute, is that trademarked? And like look it up for a little while.
As far as I can tell, the word Helvetica is not trademarked. The typeface font Helvetica is trademarked. So we can't use the typeface. The word, they didn't trademark that shit.
Okay, cool. So we have a cityscape, and we have the city of Helvetica. And if somebody gets frosty, we can, change it to the city of Helvet or something. We can just drop a couple of words, a couple of letters here, add some there. Okay, sounds good to me.
Make it a K.
That's pretty funny, actually. Helvetica with a K is pretty good. We might just do that because it's funny. Okay. So, do we want to follow the sort of Morkborg? How closely do we want to sit here? Because Morkborg is sitting at, like 6
regions.
Right, there's Galgenvek, Sarkash, the Palace of the Shadow Kingdom, the Shadow King, Grift, Kyrgyz, the Western Kingdom, the Valley of the Dead. So there's 7.
I think 1 primary and then 3 extraneous. I think 4.
So there is this sort of, central, I'm thinking Times Square, I'm thinking, I don't know, that market in Seattle. Not necessarily like a perfect one-to-one, like the most important area of the city, but the one that when you think about the city, you think about that place. And then sort of some surrounding areas. Okay, that sounds good to me. Are we a small but important detail? Are we on... we're a city, so we have to be on a river or an ocean. Which one? Or we need to be a modern city that has water pumped in, like sort of a Las Vegas.
I would
like
school river.
I was gonna go worse and make it an island. Not an island in the sense that Manhattan is an island, where it's like, yeah, you got to cross a river to get to the other side, but you're completely waterlogged. Fucking, you got to get through it, and that's why it's difficult during the escape section to get out.
Okay, yeah, because it would make it easier to wall the city in to a certain extent, and it's always fun for the bad guys to show up in boats. Players love that. I don't know if they know that they love that. Players love the bad guys to show up in boats.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the cityscape of Helvetica. Helvetica is a city on an island, or at least on a peninsula. Okay, that sounds good to me. We have a central region. So what does Helvetica do? Right? So like New York City is a trade hub. That's like their main thing. In a way that most major metropolitan cities are, a trade hub that then develops into other things, right? We're talking about New York City, we're talking about Boston, we're talking about New Orleans, we're talking about LA. And then eventually they become known for something else, right? So New York is theater, business, arts. LA, business. LA is media production, business, because business is always going to be in there. Media production and business. I don't know. Boston is
Chicago's automotive.
Yeah, Chicago automotive, and then vague business. There's sort of always this other thing. So we have business, of course, that happens in Helvetica. What either did it do I'm thinking like NAFTA, like 2004, or what is it doing now? Whichever we want it to be. What does this city do? It can be dramatically satisfying, or it can just be some shit. Like, it can be something that makes sense in this monstrous, strange world. Like, or it can be somewhat more normative.
I think it's probably going to be something pretty regular. They produce phones, some shit like that. Instead of Shenzhen, China, it's this city.
I think it's going to be like coal because it's closer to hell.
Coal. It could be fishing.
Hellstone.
It could be some sort of renewable energy. Shit like that.
Okay. So let's do... Okay, I like the fishing. The renewable energy is kind of interesting to me. So we have some choices here. So I like that. So I'm going to say Helvetica old is a fishing kind of deal. which I actually think is Boston's, is fishing and trade, and then fishing goes away with time, or at least is somewhat dissipated by a change in environmental factors. So it is a fishing community. It grows into a large town, which grows into a city. Then it becomes trade, because it always becomes trade. And then as time goes by, and fishing, while still important, is largely becomes an outsourced commodity, trade taking the pinnacle, this other industry emerges, probably as a part of a revitalization program in the 2010s, right? Let's get really noodly here. We have a lot of water, and we have an
hydroelectric baby.
Yeah, we have an outflowing river, so we could do like a dam thing, like a reservoir dam thing, or we could do. I always think it's fun to just have there be like a nuclear power plant. Like I'm thinking about like 5 Mile. What is it called? Like 5 Mile Island. Like what is the actual power plant that blew up somewhere?
We could make it weird, and it's a salt river, and they're exporting salt now. They're taking salt out of the water.
Well, there's no such thing as a salt river.
We're fancy.
That's fair. Let's see. 3 Mile Island, Middletown, Pennsylvania. That's the nuclear reactor that I'm thinking about. 1979, there was a catastrophic failure of a nuclear power plant.
Oh, and that's a great cover. If there's a nuclear power plant and the city gets fucking destroyed, oh, it's a nuclear power plant. I do think renewable and alternative energy is fun, and it gives another reason for why it's important to keep the city running for as long as possible, is if they get wiped out, a lot of shit's gonna get fucked up.
Yeah. So 3 Mile Island was right outside of Harrisburg, the capital of Pennsylvania. Not right outside, but it was near it. And so when it is the worst accident in U.S. commercial nuclear power history, on the 1 to 7 scale, it was a 5. You two talk about something while I'm looking at my screen.
All right, here's what I'm thinking.
Come on.
I think number one, we have the main trade hub. It's the center of the city. It's where everybody goes. That's where people fuck around and do stuff. Downtown. We'll call it downtown Helvetica. Cool. Done. Sightseeing-wise, it is the hydroelectric dam and the nuclear power plant are probably in the power sector of the city. That's region 2. So there's power sector, there's downtown Helvetica. Then I'm thinking 3 is the wharf. It is older, more rundown, probably a shoddier area because fishing has fallen out of vogue in this area. That's not really what runs. There's still shipping and stuff that gets transported through there, but that is the old town, is the wharf.
Yeah.
And we're still missing one final one. I don't know what that would be.
So we have downtown. We have the wharf. What was the third one?
The power district.
Which that's industrial.
Yeah, that's where the nuclear power plant and where the hydroelectric dam are.
And that will be the most out. That sort of sticks you on the outer area. Yeah, it's... So if there's a dam, for the record, it's not going to point towards the city. It's going to point away. So basically what we're talking about then is a river that splits as it approaches. So we're talking about like a delta, and then part of it has been sort of scooted off to be this dam. And then there's also this nuclear power thing. So I like both of those, especially because we have a large city. We have a large coastal city with salt water, which means we need a reservoir, which we have a reservoir with the dam. Funnily, this is exactly what Hoover Dam is to Las Vegas, along with the other reservoirs there. So we have a reservoir, we have hydroelectric power, and then eventually we have this nuclear power plant. I like all that. That all feels good. So we have the wharf, we have downtown, we have this industrial district. That leaves us with one more. Typically, right, this would be residential.
Yeah. If downtown is social and business, residential would be like Midtown.
Yes, exactly. Where you know we know people who've lived in that area. Okay, that all makes sense to me. So we've got the wharf, we've got downtown, we've got industrial, and we've got residential. What I like about these is they stack on each other. If we are thinking about, let me flip over a note card to the blank side. If you're thinking about a city, and this is important for those of you who will be building cities in the future, and you want them to make some volume of sense, you need to think about the order they were constructed in. In the US and in most other countries, you build on the water first and you push up. So as your technology gets newer, it pushes further out, and your buildings will get newer the further you get from the water, almost always, because you start at these outlets, because almost without fail, your city started as a canalway, right? Or a version of it, where things could flow downriver, and where a drag line, a mule or a team of mules could drag a boat up that river. It gives you access to fishing, access to move inland, access to clean water, all things that you need to run a city. So, where on our city is the water? Is the water to the east, the north, or the south? Right? Manhattan is to the south. A lot of places it's to the east. You know, to the north would mean that we have something where the coastline sort of burgeons out, and our city is placed there, and there's water above it. Do we have a preference there?
I would just hit it with the east.
Okay. So we have an island, right? We don't want it to be too islandy.
Yeah, it's an island in the same sense that New York is an island. It's not true.
So we have this main coastline, and then we have what is essentially a place where basically like part of it has just been washed out, and there's now an island, like a pseudo island, something where there's basically just a gap. That means there's a couple of bridges spanning that gap, and that means that something has created that break, which is almost always going to be a river. So we know where that river is. Right, that river flows, the water divides across to the other two sides of the city. And it, in ages long before people settled, it's washed away what was there. And then somewhere to the south, we have another area of river with a sort of like hydroelectric facility. And in that same area, we have this nuclear power facility, which makes sense. Those two would support each other so that if there's a fluctuation in power, they could stabilize. Now, that means that our closest residential area is on the island, and that's the wharf. Right? The wharf is this place where ships take off and move, and it means that these ships can actively launch, actively participate in commerce without blocking the river. That makes sense to me. That means, so the wharf is probably a pretty small district.
Oh yeah,
if it's
absolutely.
The oldest
that was
area
the initial area. It's been decades.
And then downtown starts as a small pocket attached to the wharf, and then expands as more businesses want to interact with it. It won't be as big as the residential area.
Never is.
And then I think the residential area is probably just the rest of that island. Right? It just sort of stretches up to the opposite end.
Yeah.
The industrial part has to be on the mainland, sort of implicitly. Mm-hmm. So, essentially, it's Long Island, right? Kind of. It's like Long Island, Jersey City, like is sort of what we're talking about.
The whole area is basically the same thing.
Okay. So what we have right now is sort of a stack that goes this way, where we have the wharf attached to like the bottom of this island, downtown builds off of it, and then we have this like uptown residential area, and then across the bridge we have this long, skinny industrial district that stretches up the coastline. I like all
Perfect.
that. I've got no issues there. Okay. So that's the basic core premise.
That's a city. That's pretty good.
Not much more to be had there. And then, you're either from the wharf or from these other areas. Okay. Woo! That was a doozy. 17 minutes later. Okay. that all sounds really good to me. I think we've got an idea of what the city looks like. We can flesh out those areas more later. I already see, thankfully, one of the benefits of drawing, where we are going to have to split these things into two parts. So, like, the industrial district is going to split into two. It's too large. And the same is going to go for the residential area. It's going to need to divide, simply because it has spread to be a large enough area that you're like, there would be differences, right? Community begats difference. So, like, there would be...
Upper East Side versus Upper West Side versus Harlem versus Morningside Heights. A lot of options.
So, if we sort of turn our attention away from that, then, what is our next thing that we think is really essential to proceed? We're doing great on time. We got, like, 50 minutes left to work.
We have to understand what the monsters are, how it's a major threat, and what the party's doing about it. It's like, is it all fucking zombies? Is it zombies and vampires? Is it the fake hordes, zombies, vampires, werewolves? What are we looking at? How big of a variation do we want?
So, something that has sort of emerged kind of naturally here is these creatures are innately tied to the apocalypse. If too many of them are in the same area, we can leave this a little wishy-washy. It is right now, but that's okay. It seems like the world just starts to end if too many of them are in the same area. I don't know if that means the world ends or if that means your world ends. Do you know what I mean? Like, is it the red moon rising over Yarnum where, like, everybody turns into monsters and that city is fucked? Or is it, you know, and Leviathan shall rise from the sea and the serpent shall fall from the sky and the horn shall, you know, is it the biblical end of the entire world, or is it the end of your world, is sort of my follow-up question. Like, is Fang stepping in to save as many residential, like, to say, like, we need to cut the infection out before it spreads? Or are they stepping in because the world will end if we do not?
I think that it's a spread of both. They're stepping in because this is the 33 or 60 or whatever psalms we're working with are the end of your world. And that kicks off the 7 seals of the apocalypse, and that's the world ends. Fang is stopping that first seal from being broken by keeping the red sun from rising.
Okay, all right. So we've really pinned something down here that I think is good. Okay, so the way that the global apocalypse works is, you know, and this quickly comes to mind in, like, fortune teller speak of, like, you know, man will create a great city, and that city will have great wonders, and then those great wonders will turn to great blood, and the city will fall. When the 7th city has fallen, humanity will fall with it, right? And Fang can be like, 2 cities have already fallen. Like, we didn't understand, and so the first one fell, because we didn't even know it was an option. And then we discovered the prophecy, and tried to stop it and failed, and a 2nd city has fallen. And we will never let another one. Like, we would rather burn it to the ground than let that happen. And so it sets up the precedent of, like, this fortune exists, and people know it's true. And if 5 more or 4 more or however many, it's dramatically up to basically the GM, but we can prescribe a number. If the rest fall, the world falls.
And if it's only 2 have fallen, it gives your players a reason to hide it. To be like, no, we can make this last as long as we can so we can save as many people as possible. If 3 fall, so I got 4 more.
Yeah.
Like, the world's still not going to end. I'm just saving 1 million people from being eviscerated by Fang.
Okay, so, you know, so I'll write 5 to 7 cities. Seals.
And then New Game Plus.
Yeah.
It's the 7 seals have happened. Now you're Mork burrowing.
If you want to make an incredibly long-form campaign, you could follow them to a couple of cities.
Yeah.
Each city has these fates. I have to be honest. I've gotten a little jumbled here. So we were talking about the large scale of how the apocalypse works, why Fang steps in, and because we were trying to figure out where monsters come from and why.
Monsters.
So these monsters need to be inextricably tied to the apocalypse. If too many of them appear, they need to be wiped out. Which means this is not going to be a metaphor for like. This is not going to be a metaphor
Community.
for like real world minority groups at all,
No.
right? I originally had talked about it might be kind of fun to have friendly monsters. Not anymore.
Gone.
If they are
Gone.
inextricably tied to the end of the world, that idea's in the bin. We don't want that awkwardness. Not our story to tell. So these are parts of the end, right? These are not, there's not this sense of community that will exist. There's not this sense of personhood. I'm even tempted to say, like, if you are dealing with like people who have been infected by a werewolf, I think that the solution becomes pin those people down, chain them up, track it back to the thing, kill the thing. All of those people stop being werewolves. And that, to me, adds the really fun element of there's always this thought, right? That if you kill the original vampire, the other vampires stop. If you kill the original werewolf, the other things stop. Recontextualizing that not as it is a person that has infected other people, and instead you need to trace it back to the unnatural thing that started
and then
it.
we get like fucking arch vampires and stuff, elder vampire or whatever.
Yeah.
You're dealing with vampires that are still kind of people until you get to the last one, and you're like, what the fuck is that?
And it's unconnected
Yeah.
to humanity. It's
Yeah.
unconnected to the
Yeah.
world. It's a thing. It's a something.
Incredible.
And
Yeah.
I think that those probably just emerge, like they just appear. Do we want them to appear randomly? Are they like ghosts where like a particularly horrible crime happens and they emerge in the wake of that crime? We're like, not like legally, but do you know what I mean? Like if there's a particularly bloody massacre, is there a risk that a vampire will emerge? If there is a moment of particular, if there's a murder of terrible ferocity, or cannibalism, might a werewolf emerge simply because that event has occurred? Or is it random? They just slip through the cracks into reality every once in a while.
I would. Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Do you want to make them parts of the fortunes?
Like how?
You don't get an arch vampire until you pull that card that has the arch vampire or elder werewolf.
The fortune teller says a beast of great fang and fur arrives, and then the next day
Interesting. So
werewolves attack.
So it kind of would change the flow of the game, but I don't mind. So at the start of an adventure, so rather than drawing the fortunes every few days like you do in Morkborg, we are sort of turning into a different game, which is totally
We're
fine.
playing a different game.
Instead, it would be you would draw one at the beginning of the adventure. Right. Blood has been spilled and shall be spilled anew each night. A vampire has risen. And that becomes the arc, is dealing with this OG vampire character. Or we can say, we want to stick closer to Morkborg, we're going to disengage a little bit. And we can just say the monsters emerge, and those things just offer highlights of signs of the apocalypse, not monsters that are forthcoming.
We said we're gonna make a Morkborg hack. Let's stick to Morkborg. I would hand wave it. I would say the DM or GM is allowed to rule it as, if you're flavoring it as the cursed energy from a massacre makes the monster appear, do it. So that way there's something to investigate. Or if you're not interested in that, you're random tabling it, they just encounter it and they have to deal with the problem.
But so something that is true then is the things always trace back to I'm trying to think of a better word than outsider or alien, like something beyond those things.
And we can't even call it an elder.
Hmm.
That's a thing.
I mean, that's a little bit more.
You could call them sources.
Primes.
So I'm looking at synonyms for a couple of words. Thesaurus.com, by the way, if you are a GM of any stripe, is your best friend. And it's giving me alien, alien, visitor, stranger isn't bad. Strangers.
Harbinger?
Harbinger?
Harbinger, yeah, not Harbinger. Harbinger.
Harbinger, intruder, interloper, outsider. It brought me back to outsider. You son of a bitch.
Outsider again.
Drifter's not bad. What was Harbinger? I like Harbinger. Harbinger's just good. Harbinger, omen, portent, precursor. Yeah, Harbinger's pretty good.
Yeah.
That roots to all the words I want them to. It could be fun to call those like root monsters harbingers, and to call the things that spawn under them omens.
Yeah.
Although Morkborg
That's
already
fun.
has omens as a positive thing.
Oh,
omens you
yeah.
can spend. So I guess it would probably just be or we could do harbingers as the smaller, and then precursor or progenitor as this thing that emerges.
Yeah.
What were you about to say, Michael?
The only idea I had was like the cracked ones. They slip through the cracks.
One of them being the cracked one is pretty good. Like this
Yeah.
thing. Okay. So I think that really does answer our question, right? So something unnatural emerges and it begins to affect the world around it, or is an independent danger. These are not empathetic creatures. These are not sympathetic creatures. These are not things to connect to, and it is some tragedy that they will end. They are pieces of the end. They are fragment of the apocalypse. And I can already see the flavor text in our book somewhere that is like, you know, you will have sympathy for their victims, but the creature at the end is not a friend. It is not an ally. It is not a misunderstood creature. These are monsters. They are from the outside and wish to destroy all that is within. There is no room for sympathy here. Is a pretty fun, like, foot down, and Spencer knows, and any like continuous viewers know, I always love hard stances in my RPGs. I like any time that it's like, nope, this is a rule of the game. This is fiber. This cannot be changed.
Harbingers are enemies. They must be killed.
They cannot be sympathized with. They cannot be empathized. They cannot be persuaded. There's nothing to persuade them.
They probably can't talk.
Yeah. Okay, so this always traces back to this sort of outsider. I love that. So that's where our monsters come from. They link back to these things that sort of fold down in the way that, you know, you get this sort of like vague bat-shaped horrible creature that whittles down to vampire. You know, this like primordial 100-eyed wolf works its way down to werewolf. You know, I love the idea that we are going to be tracing back to these horrible lineages. And what I like about that is it makes the monster manual that we will have to produce. Morkborg, I do think, as much as I love the game, one of the weaknesses it has is it gives you like 8 creatures, and then they have a random generator. I think it's going to be very fun to create trees, where you make the thing, and then you make 2 things right underneath it, 3 things underneath those, and I think that's probably the tree. Like, we don't want to do too much more than that. Just a couple of options to sort of fiddle around with. Make like 4 of those, 5 of those, 10 of those if we're feeling, you know, meaty about it. Want to make 50 monsters. Okay, that works really well for me. I think we're to a point now. 7:51, making great progress. We got 40 minutes on the clock here. We'll probably have to do New Game Plus Plus sometime in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
That's okay. We always have to do that. We can either move on and start talking about classes, or we can drill down on monsters or Fang and sort of try to figure out what the bad guys look like in a little bit more detail. Although Fang can stay pretty vague. They only show up at the end, you know. And
I think classes. I think we should brush over all of the major aspects of the game.
Sure.
I also think a quick 3-minute break so I can grab a drink and a snack.
I would love to grab something to drink. I am dry. All right.
All right.
We'll be back.
7:55. We'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be back at 7:55. Oh, sorry. I started too early. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I accidentally clicked when I was trying to do our little countdown. For those of you who are just tuning in, I know obviously our show is, to be frank, the prestige GMing show on Twitch. We get millions of viewers every day. We are trying to create basically an iteration or like a hack, a setting, kind of, for Morkborg. Trying to tune into this idea of monster hunters in a like pseudo-modern urban fantasy setting. This lends us a bunch of very easy benefits. We have easy explanations for why this place is a den of monsters, what is going on, and also, depending on how you want to run it as a GM, if you don't feel like including firearms, you have a very easy in for the fact that most cities have a far more strict firearm ban, and gunshots attract attention. You know what I mean? So it's easy to sort of write those things off. That's a question that you end up a lot with in these sorts of games. It's like, where are those things? Why aren't those things instantly solving the problem? The answer could just be they draw too much attention. Sort of depending on how you want to look at it. Or you can just include them and replace the crossbow and longbow stats with a rifle and a pistol, because who cares? You're not going to be fighting people until the end, and everything in Morkborg is so squishy that it doesn't matter. If you hit someone with a sword, they're probably going to die. If you hit a monster with a sword, it's probably going to die if you get a good lick in. The bigger and badder monsters, beyond your wildest imaginations, are going to kill 2 characters. Again, if you haven't played Morkborg yet, trust me, that's the layout. You're lucky to survive, because it sort of solves the simple thing. If I was hit with a sword, I'd probably die. I'd probably do it. If you hit a wolf with a sword, there's probably about to be one less wolf kicking around here in a minute. So we're talking about classes. Now, we're trying to create, like we said, sort of a hack of Morkborg, so we need to tune into the things that make that game work and be successful. Much in the way that Scum and Villainy is a hack of Blades in the Dark. Much in the way that, I'm trying to think of other good examples. Illuminated Worlds, the system that Critical Role created, they've said is inspired heavily by and was made in conjunction with the creator of Blades in the Dark. So there is sort of this thing where you root yourself in a game that is already successful. Pathfinder to 3.5, right? D&D moves to 4th edition. Pathfinder goes, and they make a hack of 3.5 and they call it Pathfinder 1e. So with that, we need to make a number of classes. Now that means in Morkborg, there are 6 classes, because one of the things the game wants you to be able to do is generate characters incredibly quickly, because characters will die all the time. And there are 6 because you roll a d6 to determine the class you start with, unless you want to start as the sort of Dark Souls nothing. What's it called? Unburdened, as Spencer slams a cookie. The sort of, what do you call it? Wretch or whatever. So we could either make 6 classes, or we could look to 8. 4. So we could do 4, 6, 8, or 10. I am not coming up with 12 classes in 30 minutes. I refuse. Let's do 4, 6, 8. Which of those feels better? 6 is good. 8 is good. 4 seems too low.
6 feels good.
6 is good. I feel like I'd start to get tapped out at 8.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. I'm trying to space these out on a note card so that we don't accidentally abandon anybody. Again, we try to demystify GMing and game prep in general as people who have been running games or playing in games multiple times a week, every week for years, and I remain an advocate for the humble note card. So we want to make 6 classes, which means we need to address 6 sort of something between archetypes and fantasies of this genre, right? We need to tune into what people want from the world. Immediately, I clock in with the monstrous character, right? A character that is the result, is a victim of one of these monsters, that I was trying to harness that power. I think that's a fair thought, right? Because we sort of are crossing. Thankfully, the monsters we've created have a sort of intersectional view, right? They cut through communities. They aren't members of them. So the people that they infect aren't united by that infection. They are isolated from their actual communities by being forced into another. Again, sort of a colonial thing going on there. I guess it's inevitable. Living in our world, it's the center of all of our conflicts. So I like the idea that one of our options is this sort of haunted or infected thing, because that is my personal favorite trope. I play it all the time. I think it's incredibly fun to play the undead that is trying to find out if they have a soul. You know what I mean? I always think that's pretty fun. What are some other really key? I think Spencer has tuned into one quickly in our talk that is the like street priest. This holy water that somebody else made that he has in a Gatorade bottle. Maybe that's like the street cleric or the street paladin.
It's like deal. The community leader, right? The person who's got their finger on the pulse, they can go get that stuff. I think that's fun. I was thinking something along the lines of like soldier, cop, firefighter, even like a defender, a fighter, shit like that.
So this sort of like public
adjudicator.
Servant.
Yeah, public servant.
Because ironically, like there's something problematic about the nature of wanting to play a cop in this game until you live in Monster World. And then there's this sort
of
now
good
change, right? Because there's this thought that this is a character who might have been a member of this whatever this world's version of the police force is, and then was confronted with the actual problems facing their world, which are institutional, and sort of had to shift. So we have this like haunted, infected character making their way in the city at night to be frankly like a fucking Ninja Turtle kind of archetype.
Fuck yeah,
it's literally what it is. I was just thinking about it and I was like,
oh shit,
it's like a fucking Ninja Turtle. And then we have the like servant defender, right? This can look like, depending on the sort of angle you take, this can look like the the copper detective, this can look like the firefighter, this can look like the lawyer, this can basically just be somebody who's coordinating. My question is I see how the haunted infected turns into game terms. The servant defender character seems like they're sort of the like leader, battle master. You know, they're more about allowing for movement and survival in difficult situations. My internet is getting weird, so hopefully the stream is normal. But if one of the two, you might want to check that real quick.
Yeah, you're a little bit choppy on my screen, but not bad. Not bad at all.
I'm gonna just try closing. I'm guessing that I had Chrome open to search.
Oh, that'll eat it. That'll eat it.
All right. 1 second pause. I'm gonna switch to starting soon. Turn my camera off. Turn it back on. So for those of you at home, we are still doing stuff. Camera off. Camera on. Turn on.
That's better.
Okay, there we go. We did it. Never open Google Chrome if you're trying to stream on the world's worst internet. Okay. So we have the haunted infected. We have the servant / sort of like defender. What's another thing? I'm getting like dude with a bat, like
street tough.
Yeah, the street tough. Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking about the street tough for hours. I've been thinking about it.
For me, I will always think of Kuwabara from Yu Yu Hakusho.
I follow through TMNT. You got fucking Casey Jones again.
Casey Jones. Ironically, I will say we've pretty perfectly done Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Casey Jones. What's the
April O'Neil?
April O'Neil is sort of the servant defender, right? These things add up. What are some other archetypes?
Probably
the agent,
like the ancient ninja who is evil.
The shredder. No,
the weeb.
Now if I was to make an optional additional class, having the mall sword guy be a class is pretty powerful.
Pretty fucking funny.
But to return to the game, I think the next one for me is going to be like my camera's back to being glitchy and I don't know why anymore, is going to be like the agent, right? There's a fire somewhere. I almost guarantee you I'm about to see the headlights of one of our
The headlights are about to go.
leave that window. Right, there's the agent. Maybe they're an agent of Fang. Maybe they're an agent of some other organization, right? Or maybe the professional, like, who is this? We all know the archetype I'm referring to. Do we have a different...
It's the person who knows what the fuck is going on.
I'm just wondering what the fantasy is. Yep, headlights.
The fantasy here is being the person who knows what they're doing.
So
the
it's
soldier
not...
defender is good at fighting, but has no fucking clue what a werewolf is doing in Manhattan or whatever, Helvetica.
Oh, okay. So the servant. All right, so I need to adjust my notes. So our classes so far are the haunted or infected, the servant, the street tough, the soldier, and then this figure.
The agent.
So it's not the agent then. It's like
the knowledgeable.
Yeah, it's like the librarian kind of deal. Like this is the person who like actually has the lore of what's going on. Oh, there
the theorist, the conspiracy nut, some shit like that.
I was gonna say the maddened.
Yeah, it's somebody who had seen the truth. It's like the fortune teller.
Yeah, if I don't know what the sort of like problematic link to the word is, but I'm coming back to the lunatic, like the actual OG definition of the lunatic, like this person that is seeing the world, like they're seeing.
What about the heretic?
Okay,
that's just pretty sick.
I'll do conspirator / heretic because I like the idea of them being the heretic, because if they know the truth of what's going on, that means they are aware of Fang, which means they are betraying them simply by existing. Yeah. Right. So that leaves us with a 6th class. We have the infected, the servant, the street tough, the soldier, the heretic. So we have combat. So we have like...
Combat is well tread.
We have tactical combat. We have non-tactical combat. We have lore support. We have other support. And then we have other / special, right? We have this monstrous character.
The community leader. We didn't write that one down. The one who goes to St. Peter's and gets a
I have that as the servant.
Oh, that's the servant. That fits in the same spot. Okay.
So that's it to me. That could be different by our perspective, right? I have the soldier as somebody, in my mind, the infected is somebody that is operating from the dark. The servant is somebody who's operating from the community. The street tough is somebody who is like fast moving, fast talking. The soldier is somebody trained. Like this is the person who will have a gun. And the conspirator or heretic is the guy with the book.
Yeah, true.
So 6, I'm left with a few options. My mind is going to like the person who can do magic comes to mind. That's also kind of the heretic's bag. So I'm drawn to like the person who could do magic. I'm drawn to borrow one from Monster of the Week, one of my favorites. I'm drawn to the guy,
the average Joe,
the person. Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. The mailman, like, the person who is not connected. But I guess that would be our 7th, I don't want to roll. I'm just going to make a person.
Yeah.
Like a complete.
Yeah, my guy's a DoorDasher.
Yeah.
And he runs into this.
It could be like the legend, the person that's supposed to beat this thing, or...
it's always the chosen one from Monster of the Week. Not in Morkborg.
Not in Morkborg, because they're gonna die. They're gonna be gonk.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's why it's funny.
Yeah.
So we've got. I'm trying to think of like. Let's get into like the headspace of the thing here, right? We're visualizing this adventure. The street tough doesn't actually know a priest or how it works. They run up to the thing. They open up the lid to a Gatorade bottle. They slam this water. Somebody comes up behind them and is like, go, 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 hurry. Like the heretic is behind them and is like, you need 8 ounces. They turn around and the soldier is behind them. They have a gun and are looking around. This creature is around. The servant is off somewhere else. The party has had to split. They are at a parish. An infected is lying on a table. They're like flopping around. They're in heat sweats, and the servant is trying to keep them safe. The infected, somebody like a Dampier is blocking the door, and we see the door moving, right? Who's missing from that picture? We have this monstrous character, this helpful character, this knowledgeable character, this efficient character, and then this kind of wily, dude with a bat character, which is different than the soldier. If someone's not there, who is it?
I feel like we kind of hit it all. If we're not including shit like bardic magic, somebody who's great with. We even have a face with a community leader, right? Like that's somebody who's good at talking with people.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
getting
we
through
could,
things.
if we wanted to add a little bit more of an RP element, we could go with like, the grease ball. You know what I mean? Like we could go with like the like 80s fop who's like with like slicked back hair kind of deal.
I was trying to think of how to incorporate like a rogue.
Yeah, I guess we are missing somebody who's really stealthy. That could be the street tough, given the experience.
I think for the most part, it's going to largely just be whoever does it. Like, do you know what I mean? But if we wanted to hit that, we could go with. It's very connected to the sort of street tough thing, but it would be like the urchin.
I'll tell you what. I think that the street tough should be stealthy, knowledgeable, street smart.
Yeah, they're sneaking up on someone with a bat and cracking them in the back of the head.
The soldier walks in and starts blasting. The street tough sneaks in and does some shit.
Then I think I'm gonna make the call. I think number 6 is
Joe. Is Average Joe.
Is Average Joe, and I'm gonna tentatively title it the DoorDasher. I think that 1 through 5 get like so in the way that Morkborg works, for those of you who don't know, the stat spreads are loosely based on class. You can all play classless in Morkborg, which can be really fun. I like the idea that if you roll the d6 and you get a 6, you end up with none of that. Like, you are just a guy. You don't get any abilities. You don't have any of the skills that the other classes have. You are... It's just up to the equipment you have. Like, it's, you don't have any weird ability. And what you could do for fun is you could say anybody who has rolled the DoorDasher, if they survive through the adventure, can choose to pick one of the other classes to become a member of, if they so choose. So that's our 6 classes. We have 17 minutes left. We've got a new buddy. We have one that's had a new class, the Skinwalker. Okay, so we've got these 6 classes. We've got our bad guys. We know the way monsters work. We know the way the apocalypse works. Things that are left to really sort of kick into here. One is, how does magic work? And because we know how hitting someone with a bat works. That's not complicated. How does magic work? What does magic do? And just figuring out what these classes can do is our main sort of bread and butter here. And monster design, but that's going to have to be its own episode if we do that on stream.
We could fully remove magic from being something that PCs can do. You don't get that shit. Even the monstrous is just they have better health or some shit.
Problematizes
like they can get...
the heretic a little bit though. If we cut,
I think the heretic, even then, it's not magic. It's like pressure point knowledge. Essentially, it's knowing.
I guess my question is, I'm cool dropping it, but it leaves me with some questions then. So like, why does holy water work? Right? If we're dropping magic, then there are some questions that I'm sort of left with in the world. Like, what is magic replaced by? Can only objects be imbued with magic? Like, is the mistake to think that you can speak magic into existence? Like, does that not exist, but magical items do? Does holy water work? Why? True. Like, why does holy water work? Is Fang right? Like, does holy water work because people believe in it? Like, not having magic opens up questions about the rest of the world, and also makes hacking into Morkborg hard because powers are a huge part of what makes Morkborg work. Now, Morkborg is kind of doing what you're talking about, though. You don't know spells. You have a scroll in your bag that you take out and cast.
True, yeah. So we would have like holy items or whatever. stuff like that.
No, it's fine. I
like
think that it. I like the idea that it's a holy item, and the answer to why does it work is, I mean, we could go with the usual hand wave, which is people think it does. Belief in it exists.
We could even go with, this is the apocalypse. Magic exists. Nobody alive can make it happen.
Yeah.
1,000 years ago when they made this scroll, it worked. Good luck. You can use the scroll.
Magic is just somewhat gone. Or is inherently really destructive. Like, that could be fun. That might explain why you don't want Fang to get involved. Like, if magic always is destructive, you know, there might be something fun to, like, there are no healing spells. There is no Revivify. There's not even anything that, like, buffs people, really. Or if it does, at the end of it, something terrible will happen to you. Like, you know, there is always a terrible cost. There is always discomfort at the end of it. Or it's a big fireball. And that's what magic is good for. You know what I mean? Could be kind of an interesting take on it, right? That's why people are afraid of Fang. Fang loves magic. They use it all the time.
They eat that up.
It's just, magic is not made... Magic was made by people. It's not there to help. It is there to deal with the problem. We could sort of talk out... Moving in that direction makes sense in the world. How do we feel about it? Like, do we want there to be healing or support magic? Do we think that's important? It's a little counterintuitive to the way that Morkborg works to be able to heal a lot, but there is healing. So in Morkborg, scrolls divide into two categories: clean and unclean. Clean is sort of the clerical magics. Some of them buff. They make you go invisible. You know, I think there are a few that heal you. Unclean scrolls are arcane. They are damaging. They hurt. Things like that.
I think if we do have healing, the price is you're using your own health points to heal the party member.
Oh, vampiric.
Now, wait a minute. Now, Spencer had said something very interesting. What if the magic all comes from these monsters? Right? What if there's not? So this is interesting. What if, like, holy water works for reasons, and we don't really need to explain why. Like, we can say that holy water works. Well, holy water works if a Buddhist monk blesses it. Like, all that matters is that a person of great religious power blesses the water. It will always function. It might be kind of fun to be like, but magic always comes from the apocalypse. It always stems from, and if we want to keep this, it always stems from the Blood Sun. No matter what, using magic drags you closer in that direction. Or
like
not.
That.
We can throw that idea out, and we can say magic is normal. You have a couple of healing spells. You have a couple of buffing spells. Healing is limited to 1 or 2 HP ever, and that would be considered like a really good spell. And then damaging spells.
I think that magic coming from... Yeah, I think magic coming from the Blood Sun, great. I do think that it's incredibly, incredibly limited for human beings to utilize it. Your fucking Street Tough doesn't know how to cast Healing Word.
Yeah.
He never will. He's a fucking biker gang member. That's not his shit. Fang knows it because they've studied the arcanic books of 300 BC or whatever. They can do that shit. You don't have that.
Okay, so I like this. So it is similar to Morkborg, but it's almost a little bit more like Call of Cthulhu, where it's like you can, like,
yeah, good fucking luck.
The heretic can do it a couple of times a day, and maybe be okay. Like,
yeah.
I think it could be fun too if, like, the closer you get to the Blood Sun, or when Blood Sun hits, magic's strong, magic's super strong. Then
it's pretty fun to be like your scroll is empowered if you're using a scroll or whatever.
Yeah, the closer
healing magic. I don't think there's any healing magic. Not really. Shit doesn't work. It's destructive.
Yeah, magic comes from the Blood Sun. So magic comes from the Blood Sun. There is divine magic, but it's limited in scope.
It's like you can have holy water and it'll burn a vampire. It's not I cast Radiant Sun and it immolates them.
So I know how this world building wise would work then. There was an age long past when divine magic could heal, those days are gone. Only echoes remain. Holy water will singe the skin of the unholy. That is all that remains. Small gifts, tainted and often obscure. But the magic of the blood sun has never waned even a sliver. It is as strong now as it was in the days of old. And so only destructive magic exists. And if you do find divine magic, it will be an item that will heal 1 HP a day. Like,
you get the fucking Shroud of Turin. It's like, yeah, you can make your stealth better. That's it.
Okay, so we've got sort of this blood sun and then faded divine magic. It adds such a fun element, and I don't know how much we need to like get into it. There's such a fun concept to me. It suggests this, like, the gods are dead. Like, you know, the gods are dead. You pray to their corpses and are offered small relief. The blood sun lives always. Like, it will return 1,000 times. It has been banished 1,000 and has risen again. You know, that kind of thing is pretty fun.
Sick.
Okay. So you got a pretty good idea of how magic works. It's loose, but it doesn't need to be much better than that. It's going to mostly do damage and, you know, be... if it's going to buff things, it'll buff things at a terrible cost, because it's the blood sun giving you that gift. It is rarely, if ever, going to be, you know, this sort of divine, and the way we think about it in D&D, right? This healing, holy magic that is easy to use and easy to memorize and only takes faith and a little bit of elbow grease. Right. I'm gonna blow my nose. Talk about magic or monsters and classes.
Yeah, we could do... For monsters, I do think that we kind of set it up where it's the tree, where it's main, Harbinger, 2 lieutenants, 3 foot soldiers, right? A tree of monsters. That's easy enough. And we already know vampires, ghouls, we could even do werewolves. It's like a body horror thing. What are the other major ones? That's 3 that we have just off the top.
How it's a little were-rat.
Unfortunately, that falls under werewolf. I would call them like were creatures. It'll be werewolves. It'll be were-rats are the foot soldiers. Werewolves are the lieutenants.
So,
and then the final thing is like an eldritch abomination of a wolf.
If we're thinking about like the tropes, then, right, we want to lean into these intrinsic fears that cross time a little bit, right? Because they should trace back to these like primal versions. I like the werewolf. The werewolf traces back to this bestial thing that spreads and infects, and it makes you embrace that natural world where most creatures die bloody. I like that. That's spooky. I get it. The vampire traces back to this idea of the predator, right? And it's different. It's not embracing the natural cycle. It is this unnatural being that takes your mind and takes your body and takes everything it can from you and leaves you with nothing. That's very good. The next one that comes to my mind is the Thing. It's the Skinwalker. It's the Shape Changer. It's that which changes its form. You know, it is sort of... Spencer knows my deep love for John Carpenter's The Thing, so it's always what I think of. We have the werewolf, we have the vampire, we have the Thing. I think that zombie really falls under vampire fundamentally, right? It is this creature.
I was thinking zombie too. And we could have different types of zombies, and they're more, I don't know, mindless hunger.
Yeah, see, the vampire is more suave than the zombie to me. That's why I think that ghouls fit into a different category. They're an unending hunger. Vampires are mind control, takeover, enter society. That's sort of the difference between the two for
So
me.
I'll do like the zombie / ghoul, and some of these will end up like sort of incorporating into the same thing over time. That's fine. Like, it could be... Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about fears, these could all be under the same... triangle, right? There is this being that is about hunger. That is what they are about. And the 2 immediate divides below them would be a vampire and a werewolf, right? Those would be the next step. And then below them would be like the zombie, the ghoul, right? And these things all trace back to the hunger, this thing, this primordial fear that one day you will be hungry, that one day you will be the predator.
And that's the blood sun, right? That's the thing that's spawning everything else, is the blood sun dropping down on everything else.
But that would
What
mean
months?
I'm trying to figure out what these trees are and how many of them there are. Like, is the hunger of the blood sun one of them, and like the rage of the blood sun another, and you know, these sorts of things. As we push into another direction, I'm left with like if these like hungry beings, and again, I'm totally cool with the werewolf is one and they scour down, and the vampire is one and they scour down, and the ghoul is one and they scour down. I'm just trying to think of what the other sort of like families would be.
The other
here,
branch.
right? If these are all hungering creatures, which is a common fear for people, another one is like maddening creatures, which is the sort of like Cthulhu. I'm thinking of Dagon, this impossible fish man that clings to the obelisk and terrifies the man. I'm thinking of, you know, I'm thinking of those the space polyps. I'm thinking of those like pyramid-headed aliens that can, you know, create storms and things like that. These things that are beyond.
Yeah, I was thinking of, I don't know what monsters go with it, but fear of darkness, fear of like alone, fear of that kind.
Yeah, the fear of like the isolation, the dark, the thing you can't see. I love that. I always love a monster that's just a shadow that consumes things. Is always one of my favorites. Okay, so we need to get a little bit more crystal here. We got 3 minutes. I like the vampire. I like the werewolf. I like the shapeshifter. I like the zombie. I like the shadow.
I keep thinking about a human threat, you know, a sorcerer, a warlock, whatever you want to call them, somebody who has embraced the blood sun and is using arcane magic to do blank. Summon horrors, mind control people, I don't know, something like that. That can slot in somewhere.
I love the warlock or the cultist.
Yeah.
I was thinking blood sun sorceress.
Yeah, exactly. Like this thing,
Yeah.
this person, like rising into the sky, their eyes filled with a red light that you can't see. You know, they're in a dark room, but only their body looks like it is bathed under the light of a blood red sun. Like, that's very good. I love that. Symbolism is strong. In the same way that the vampire, the werewolf, the shape changer, these things are all strong. I like the shadow.
Fear of power.
Yeah, I like the cultist. I like what they represent.
The fear of subjugation is sort of the tie-in for that.
And I like that there's this connection to, like, you know, if I had the power, would I be different? Is always a fun one for me. Like, seeing the warlock and being like, if I had been made that offer, would I have refused? Like, can I pretend that I would have been strong enough to say no? We obviously need to workshop this more. We have a minute left. So I think that we sort of have a good idea of what this looks like, though. You know, what we need to decide between now and next time, or maybe during next stream about this, is, do we want to do movie monsters that are popular and across fiction? Because that's a good in, right? The vampire exists in many places. The werewolf exists in many places. Or, and I think we need to divide these two because it's what we've sort of kept bouncing off of, do we want to tap into these like primal things? Right? Are the vampire, the werewolf, and the zombie all prescribers of the hungry thing, that which hungers? Or is the thing, the shadow, both members of the unseen, the world that you cannot see? Is the cultist a member of, you know, the call, the maddening, this thought that this thing will draw you in, it will make you an offer you can't refuse, and you will swear yourself to it someday, you know? Or do we want to do foundational horror monsters that exist across people, which is the cultist, the vampire, the werewolf, separated from those big sort of thinky bubbles? Go ahead, make it quick. We're out of time.
Sorry, I like having it as the first, not monster, because that gives so much more creativeness to us. We can create what's a werewolf, but change it to anything we want.
I agree. I think that we need to make it more cerebral.
Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit. So far, I'm getting like the thing that hunts, the thing that stalks, and the thing that corrupts seems to be our three big ones so far, and we can sort of keep poking in that direction. Yeah, I mean, pretty popular. Makes me think of, you know, the Magnus Archives. Makes me think of sort of things in that vein. Okay, I think we've made a lot of great progress. You know, we know what the city looks like. We know what the classes look like. We could totally spend another episode working on this, or this would be plenty to just sort of move ahead with this as a sort of writing project, to sort of delve into these individual pages and see what the larger thing looks like. With that, I think I'm going to kick it over to Spencer, because it seems like it's just about time to sign off. Thank you, everybody, for watching the show. So much fun to run, and I hope that it encourages you in the future, watching this VOD, to build your own worlds. Don't be afraid to, like, hack things into the game that you want, to create the monsters that you want, to just come up with it whole cloth. Because if you can make up the numbers and you can, like, get the good ideas out there, it doesn't really matter if it's perfect or not. You will know what you want, and the players will see it. I just want to reiterate that one more time. Spencer, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Yeah, thank you again for watching the stream. You can catch us every Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday is our Theros Actual Play D&D podcast. You can find all of us and a couple of our friends streaming that from 7 p.m. Eastern Standard to about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can catch this stream same time, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., give or take, where we demystify the DMing process and world building and how to make RPGs. All that is what we cover in this stream. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitch. You can follow us on TikTok, where we make memes, we make advice videos on how to run TTRPGs, tips, rulings, things of that nature. So you can find us on TikTok, Twitch, YouTube. You can follow us on Facebook. You can check out our website, ttrpg.com, where we go through the rules of various TTRPGs, primarily Dungeons & Dragons. That's our bread and butter. But yeah, thank you for tuning in. Follow us on all those various social media and websites. That's it.